Amberin Zaman is a public policy fellow with the Wilson Center's Middle East and Global Europe programs. She's also a prominent journalist covering Turkey, the Kurds, and regional conflicts in Iraq, Syria, and Azerbaijan. Amberin, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
I want to ask you first, in preparation to speak with you, I was reading some current articles about Turkey. Yesterday in The Guardian, a piece by Elif Shafak that said, did you read the piece?
Yes,
Yeah,
I did.
okay, great. And it said this, it was an unnamed Turkish person quoted as saying, once we were the envy of the Muslim world, we were modern, westernized. Every year, Pakistanis, Iraqis, Iranians, they would come to Turkey to breathe freedom. Not anymore. Nobody envies us now. And then Shafak goes on to write, intimidation and paranoia dominates the land. So I'm wondering, do you agree with this assessment?
Well, there's a slight element of exaggeration, clearly, in terms of how good it used to be and how bad it's become. But clearly, Turkey is headed in the wrong direction. And I did read the article, and I do think that she captured a lot of the neuralgia that now afflicts my country, Turkey. And it's very sad, really, because as she pointed out, particularly in the early days of this Islamist government that's now been in power for 13 years, Turkey really was doing great things, so much so that the European Union finally decided to open full membership talks with Turkey. It was trying to tackle the Kurdish issue in ways that none of its predecessors had, this Islamist government. It opened direct talks with the Kurdish rebel group that's been fighting for self-rule inside Turkey, which was the right thing to do, because clearly you can't fix this through military, means.
Right. So that begs the question: what changed? What went wrong?
Well, there are many sort of answers to that question, and I would venture that one of the main reasons that things are as bad as they are is incumbency. This government has been in power for way too long. If for any healthy democracy to have the same party in power ruling on its own for so long is clearly not healthy, and particularly because there's absolutely no credible opposition.
Is that why they were reelected in the last elections?
Well, that's another sort of
or is there
subject.
More to that story?
There's more to that story, but also the institutions remain very weak in Turkey. And they've become even weaker now with this government, and particularly under the leadership of the president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who is on course to sort of become an absolute sort of leader in the sort of negative sense.
Authoritarian or
yes.
even dictator.
Yes.
Along those lines, the assault on free speech and freedom of expression, back in January, this petition from academics criticizing the government and his response, and they were criticizing the government's treatment of the Kurdistan Workers' Party. And Erdogan has jailed some of these people, had them investigated. Is this just tip of the iceberg? Is this you have personal experience with this sort of backlash from the government?
Well, hardly a day passes without somebody being prosecuted for allegedly insulting the president. God knows how many court cases. And I mean, for the most sort of harmless things, like a Facebook posting that's critical of him. We even had this most extraordinary case because there's a cult of personality that's now evolved around the president. The country's deeply polarized, so you have about half of the populace that is sort of in awe of him, adores him, and the rest who hate him. And so you have this case where a husband actually filed a legal complaint against her wife for having been critical of this president that he adores. So it's sort of been carried into the bedroom, if you will, this polarization. And we didn't mention the Syrian conflict, and I think that's another sort of big problem for Turkey, and the way that this government handled it, the fact that they sort of allowed opposition rebels of all stripes to use Turkey as a launching pad to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. And in the process, you saw ISIS using Turkey as a sort of logistical hub.
And you mentioned the word
incompetence. It was called the jihadist highway,
Right. And you mentioned you used the term incompetence earlier, and does part of that apply here in that President Erdogan originally thought that this would be a brief conflict? He predicted the Syrian conflict would take months.
In fact, we had a former minister say that he'd warned Erdogan about this, and that Erdogan had sort of brushed his concerns aside, saying, oh, he'll be gone in 6 months. Well, how many years has it been now? And he seems to be winning. And we have nearly 3 million Syrian refugees now inside Turkey. And of course, the sort of problem that's looming ahead of us is what happens to all these fighters if indeed Assad wins? Do they get pushed inside Turkey? What do we do with these people, these armed people? It's a nightmare.
We've also seen a rise in sexism, changing of the standards as far as marriage. No longer a civil marriage certificate necessary. It can all be done now by religious standards. What has happened to women's rights, and how far backward have things slid?
Well, it's a roller coaster ride, because in the early days of this government, we actually saw a lot of progress in terms of women's rights. In fact, the civil code was rewritten in ways that really advanced women's rights, so that, for instance, men were no longer considered the head of a household, for instance. Intramarital rape was made a criminal offense. Penalties for so-called honor killings were stiffened. This president's wife put a lot into promoting girls' education. But over time, we saw this sort of religious side of the president, this piety, sort of infuse a lot of the policy making in ways that now today, as you pointed out, the marriages, religious marriages, are now considered, are not considered illegal, shall we say.
And on the Turkish-Kurdish peace process, or hopes for a peace process, is there any hope right now?
Absolutely none.
None.
Not now, because on the contrary, if anything, things are set to get worse. As you know, the war between the government and the PKK rebels resumed last summer, and in the past, this war was conducted in the countryside. Today, it's happening inside the cities, and you have entire towns, neighborhoods razed to rubble, horrible images coming out of there, so that, there seems to be very little difference between those places and, say, Homs or Hama in Syria. It's quite frightening, and you've had hundreds of thousands of people displaced. We now have a huge internal refugee problem, and you now see Turkish Kurds trying to go to Europe together with the Syrians. So, and also the talk coming out of Ankara, it's very harsh, very sort of confrontational.
What will it take for progress to occur, positive progress to occur? Can you imagine it in the context of this government, or will it take a change in government?
Well, a change in government doesn't seem to be on the cards. As I said, half of the country adores this president.
So is there anything that can happen within this context?
And he's managed to sort of galvanize public support for this campaign against the PKK. And it has to be said that the PKK, for its part, has, has its share of blame in all of this. If it says it was provoked, well, it need not have risen to the bait, because we had a 2-year ceasefire in place. People weren't dying anymore. And the fact that they moved their campaign to the towns has disrupted people's lives, just really shattered people's lives. And so it's going to take both sides to do some compromising, and we see no signs of it.
One final thought, and would love to speak with you about this more in the future, but for now, one final thought is the impact on Turkey's international relations. Is the country more isolated than ever right now?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's become quite hackneyed now, but as you know, Turkey used to have zero problems with neighbors. Now it has problems with all of its neighbors, and not least Russia, and that's a huge problem. Turkey shot down a Russian plane that it said had violated its airspace back in November, and Russia has since sort of obsessively pursued means of punishing Turkey for this. So economic sanctions. Russian tourists, were a very big source of revenue for Turkey. They're not coming to Turkey anymore. We all know that if Turkish troops were to enter Syria or to fly over Syria, they'd now get shot down by the Russians. So, Turkey's hands are tied now, certainly in Syria because of that. And it has troubled relations with Israel. They used to be strong allies, and that alliance was what allowed Turkey to project power in the Middle East. The alliance with Israel projected hard power, and the reforms that this government was undertaking projected soft power. So it was a great sort of combination. And that's gone. At the same time, Turkey is at odds with Egypt, doesn't have an ambassador in Egypt anymore. And the list continues. No relations with Armenia. And there was a time when we thought that it might have relations with Armenia. That's sort of on the shelf now, or rather in the icebox. So yes, Turkey is very isolated.
Well, I hate to end on a negative note. Sometimes that's unavoidable. So
I'm
thank you
afraid
for
at the
joining us.
moment, yes, thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you.